Hey everyone, welcome to Great Lakes Church. My name is Carson, and I gotta tell you before we get into our weekly message that we're a community of people helping people find and follow Jesus. We're based out of Southeast Wisconsin. We have physical locations in Kenosha and Racine, but if you're listening to this or watching this, you've found our online presence. We share content on our YouTube and our podcast platforms wherever you listen, and we love that you're a part. If you want to know more about what's going on here at Great Lakes Church, you can find out more at greatlakeschurch.com or check out our central hub. But until then, everything you need is going to be in the description, so enjoy the message, and we'll catch you next time.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. In many ways, this feels like the pandemic because I'm just speaking to the camera. And this week at our Kenosha campus, we had a power outage, we had an ice storm, right? We had some crazy stuff that happened, so we were not able to film like we regularly do at our weekends on Wednesday service. And so I'm just going to talk to you and bring the extra energy today. And it kind of is fitting because the title of the series that we're in is called Ready or Not, and it's all about change. And the whole idea is, ready or not, change is coming. It's coming to your family, it's coming to your workplace, it's coming to your life, it's coming to our church. It is coming. It's part of life. 3,000 years ago, King Solomon of Israel, he writes these words. He says that for everything, there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. All right, there's a time to be born and a time to die. There's a time to work and a time to rest. There's a time to settle down and there's a time to move. There's a time to buy and a time to sell. And the whole idea is this, that everything in life is seasonal, right? We go through seasons in our relationships. We go through seasons in our careers and in every aspect of our personal lives. And the thing about seasons is that every season we go through brings different types and different amounts of change. And on week one, I let you know that we're talking about three types of change throughout this series. We're talking about evolutionary change. We did that on week one, which is a gradual process of changing into something different. So you're single and you know that you're going to be married and that change is happening. Right? You are in a 40-year career, 45 years, you've been doing your best, but now you see that you're moving towards retirement. That's evolutionary change. Last week, we talked about crisis change. That's a sudden event that forces change on you. All right, so that can be a death, a natural disaster. That can be losing your job without any notice. All right, that is crisis change. And then today, we're going to talk about visionary change. And visionary change is a change that you voluntarily initiate. It's change that happens because you intentionally make it happen. And the reason you make it happen is because you want something better or something different than you currently have. Now, the term visionary change alludes to this, but I want to be super, super clear today, and that is this, that visionary change is proactive and it's not reactive. Right? In other words, it's change that happens on purpose. It's change that occurs because someone has a vision and they are moving towards that vision. Now, the reason someone would have a vision for anything in life is because they want something better or because they want something different. All right, think about this, right? If you do not have vision, when someone lacks vision in their life, they're kind of stuck. Right? When someone lacks vision, it's very easy to become overwhelmed with whatever their current circumstances. It's easy to become discouraged or defeated or depressed or disappointed. You know, there's so many sad stories that came out of the Holocaust, and one of the stories that came out was how people living in concentration camps were often forced to do pointless and humiliating work. Right? For example, one of the jobs that people would be given is they'd have to spend their days digging holes and digging trenches. Right, this picture is right out of the Holocaust. So you'd spend your days digging holes, and then at the end of the day or the next day, after the hole or the trench had been dug up, is you would now have to fill that hole with the very dirt that you just dug up. And so as you can imagine, that kind of meaningless work, day after day, week after week, resulted in a whole lot of emotional and psychological damage. And of course, we don't in any way want to even suggest that we have those kind of extreme streams when it comes to the meaningless things in our life, right? We're not spending our days digging trenches only to refill them, and we can't relate to the Holocaust. But here is what you and I can relate to, is that when we are in a season of doing things and it just doesn't feel like it has any significance or any meaning. Or we're in a marriage that just seems to be on repeat. Nothing's getting better. It's very easy for it to affect us emotionally and psychologically. It's very easy to feel hopeless. And that's why we need vision. Right? Vision inspires action. So there's a crowdfunding site called Kickstarter that gives visionaries the opportunity to share their innovative ideas with other people. And their hopes is that these people who learn about their ideas will get excited enough to help fund them, right? Sometimes it's an innovation related to technology. Other times it's related to games or music or films. So a few years ago, my friend Bob Crum, who just by this picture that he has of himself, you can tell he's very artistic, right? But Bob and his family have been part of Great Lakes Church for more than a decade, and he had this idea to take his artistic and creative skills and design a custom deck of playing cards, right? More than 1,000 people backed this project. I was one of them, right? Bob's vision for designing a deck of cards came to life. It became reality. Now, here's the deal. Every single product that exists, every single business, every single movement on this planet today is the result of someone's vision. It's a result of someone initiating change because they wanted something different or something better. And if we were to take time and I were to say, hey, why don't you shout out the name of visionaries? All of us could do it, right? We could talk about Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. or Helen Keller or Harriet Tubman or Steve Jobs, right? We can all think of different visionaries who throughout history have made a difference. But I don't think most of us would yell out our names. But the truth is, at some level, we are all visionaries, right? So if you've ever had an idea of where you wanted to go on vacation, and then you took the time to plan that vacation and buy plane tickets, and you decided to book a hotel, and maybe once you got there, you got an Uber, and you went to different places in that city or in that area, right? That is vision. If you were ever single and you said, man, I'm gonna be married someday, and then you meet that person and you start falling in love with that person, and you say, I wanna spend my life with this person, and then you get married, that's the result of vision. If you have a college degree, it's because at some point after high school, you envisioned the career you wanted to get into or the kind of job you wanted to have, so you enrolled in higher education, you studied, you worked hard, and eventually you got the diploma. So to some extent or another, every single one of us are visionaries. And being a visionary starts in our mind, right? It starts with our thinking, which ought to encourage you, because it means that regardless of the current circumstances that you are in, you have the ability to control a little bit of what happens in the future. And you do that by envisioning something better. So if you don't like where you're currently at financially or in your marriage or maybe in your friendships or just kind of where you're at in any arena of life, you have the power to envision something better. The Apostle Paul, 2,000 years ago, he's sitting in a cold, dark dungeon. He's sitting in a prison cell in Rome, and he takes the time to write these words to followers of Jesus living in Philippi. He says, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. He says, think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. So here's Paul, a prisoner of Emperor Nero, sitting in a prison cell in Rome, and he writes this letter, and it's filled with words like joy and rejoice. There are a whole lot of things in this life we cannot control, but we can absolutely control our mindset. And so what I want to do today is ask you two very specific questions as it relates to you and to vision. Here we go. Question number one. What vision do you have for your life? What vision do you have? And I hope you have a vision, because a person without a vision is slave to their reality. So what vision do you have for your life? And you might have vision for multiple areas of your life. Maybe for you, you envision becoming financially free, right? You want to get to a place in life where you don't owe anybody anything, you are out of debt, you're prepared for retirement, you're able to give at the level you want to give. Well, that's vision. Or maybe you envision for yourself to be in great physical shape. You want to be active, you want to have energy, you just want to feel good throughout the day. Or maybe you envision moving forward with an idea you've had for a while, and you want to start a company or you want to launch a product. Maybe you've had a vision for a while of personal development, and you have this dream of getting a degree or learning new skills. Or maybe for you, you envision going somewhere and making memories or experiencing something special with the people in life that you love. And you've got this big plan to someday be able to take this trip. Here's the deal. All of us are visionaries to some extent or another. But if you don't have a very clear vision of where you are headed in life, what's going to happen is you are going to stumble around and you are going to make it up as you go. I love this quote by Pastor Craig Rochelle. He says this, he says, all people end up somewhere in life, but few end up there on purpose. In other words, we're all going to end up somewhere. It's either going to happen intentionally on purpose or it's going to happen on accident. All right, so think of vision as looking at the picture of a puzzle, right? So when you consider the vision for your life, it's like looking at the picture of a puzzle, and your responsibility is to take the various pieces, right? The various pieces of your life, the various opportunities you've had, the various talents you have, your connections, your personality, your experiences, all of those things. You have the opportunity to take all of the things in your life and then create a picture from it. That's vision. And like I said, every one of us are visionaries, but the issue we have to evaluate is, what is it that I envision for my life? Like, what does the picture of your life look like? Do you imagine yourself rising higher and overcoming obstacles and living with joy and being a person of character, adding value to others? Do you see yourself being an encourager? Do you see yourself as inspiring other people? Or is the picture you have of yourself as you look into the future a picture where you're always struggling, where you're always defeated, always addicted, never getting good breaks? Right? Because the pictures we have in our mind will eventually determine the kind of life that we have. It's possible to have a vastly different life than you currently have right now, a year from now or 2 years from now. But it requires you to change the picture in your mind. So what vision do you have for your life? If you don't know where you want to end up, I'm just going to tell you, you're in trouble. And the reason why is because if you don't know where you want to end up, you're going to just take whatever path is in front of you, whatever path feels good at the moment, whatever path just seems to be the right option at the right, right when it's right in front of you. And so it's just a very emotional thing. And King Solomon of Israel warns about this when he writes this. He says, there is a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death. Ends in death of a relationship, death of finances, death of dreams. And so it's important to have a very clear vision for our life. When it comes to me and the vision I have for my life, there's certainly different things I could talk about. One of the visions that I've had for my life for a very long time is I want to be the kind of guy who adds life to other people, adds value to people. Instead of going through life just trying to get people to add value to me and make me feel better, I just, in every environment, want to add value to people in whatever way I can. Another vision I have for my life is I want to impact the faith of other people. And I promise you, this is not just because I'm a pastor. If I was not a pastor, I would say the same thing. And the reason why, and it's the reason why I'm not private about my faith and secretive about it, the reason why I want to have an impact on the faith of other people is I am absolutely convinced, because I've seen it thousands of times, no exaggeration, where when one person decides to follow Jesus and they are sincere about that decision, there is a ripple effect that begins to occur in the relationships around them, in their family, with their friendships, with the people they work with. Someone surrendering their life to Jesus can impact an individual's family tree forever. And so I get really passionate about that, and it's a vision I have for my life. What's the vision you have for your life? So I have an acquaintance who is fairly successful in his industry. He's a friend, right? He has accomplished more than most people in his field, no doubt about it. Several years ago, I'm talking to him, and I learned that his dad is in the same industry. And so I said to him, I said, man, your dad must be crazy proud of you and kind of where you've ended up in life. And he said, Dave, I'll just be honest, my dad's never told me that he's proud of me. He actually criticizes how I do things, and he's always telling me how he would do it instead. Well, that was several years ago. Not long ago, I'm talking to the same guy, and he says, hey, Dave, he says, you're not gonna believe this. He said, my dad called me, and I was completely out of the blue, and he just said, hey, I'm calling to let you know I'm really, really proud of you. And I was just kind of like taken back a little bit because I knew their relationship. And I said, why do you think your dad did that? He said, well, I know, because my dad told me. My dad said he was at an event where some children were honoring their father. And they were talking about how growing up, their father would always say, we're proud of you. And I'm proud of you. And growing up, their father would always say, I believe in you, and I love you, and I'm here for you. And they talked about how they are where they're at in life because of their father. And he says, my dad said to me, as I heard them saying those words, I knew my kids weren't ever going to say that about me. And he said, so I've just decided I don't want that kind of relationship with my kids. I want them to know I'm proud of them. I want them to know I believe in them. And he says, my dad was really vulnerable, and he opened up and he says, I know I've been pretty critical of how you do things. And he goes, quite honestly, it's based on some of the insecurities that I have because you've surpassed me in the industry. And as he's telling me this story, I'm just very moved because his dad is in his late 60s and yet somehow is able to have a renewed vision for his life. His son doesn't even live with them anymore. And yet he says, I know the kind of father I want to be. And even though I'm in my late 60s, I'm going to start moving in that direction. It is never too late to have a vision for your life. So what vision do you have for your life? That's the first question as it relates to you. The second question is this. What vision do you have that's bigger than just your life? What vision do you have that's just bigger than just your life? 2,400 years ago, the city of Jerusalem was in ruins. All right, it was a sad time for the Jewish people because more than 140 years earlier, they had been conquered by the Babylonian Empire, and many of them were marched off into exile. All right, so during this time period, the Jewish temple, which of course is a great place of worship, is destroyed. Much of the wall around the city had been destroyed and was left in disrepair and in ruins. And that was a really, really big deal. And the reason why is because in the ancient world, a wall around a city symbolized strength and protection. In many ways, the walls around the city were really the only defense that the people had. And so often these walls would be built up very wide and very tall. Now, there are a few cities today that are like that. Dubrovnik, Croatia is one of them, where the city has a wall that is built around it. The walls were built in the 13th century to protect the city from pirates and from unwelcome guests. Right? There's 16 towers that are around the city. Well, this kind of gives you an idea of what Jerusalem was like before the Babylonian invasion. Right? Before the invasion, portions or the wall had stood strong, but after the invasion, it was left in ruins. It had been burned with fire. And so it sat in disrepair for more than 140 years. Well, one day, a man by the name of Nehemiah, who was living in Susa, which is the capital city of the Persian Empire. So here's Susa over here, and here's Jerusalem over here. Nehemiah learns about the condition of the walls surrounding Jerusalem, and he is heartbroken. He is distraught. Now, even though he doesn't live in Jerusalem, the reason he's distraught is because these are his people, right? He's a Jew, and his ancestors had been exiled many years earlier when Babylon had taken over the city. And so he feels a strong connection to the city. And he just has this growing desire to do something about the walls. Now, just to pause here, it's important to know this. Nehemiah is not a pastor. He's not a priest, right? He's not some religious leader like you might expect if we're reading a story from the scriptures. Nehemiah is a cupbearer, which means his job was to prepare and serve wine for the Persian king. Right? So part of his responsibility is he would drink a little bit of the wine ahead of time to make sure it wasn't poisoned. And then he would serve to the king. And so Nehemiah works for King Artaxerxes. And one day as he's preparing wine and serving wine, the king notices that he's down, that he's discouraged, that something is wrong. He's been around Nehemiah enough to know, man, something's not right. And so he says, Nehemiah, what's wrong? Well, why are you so sad? And Nehemiah responds, he says, long live the king. How can I not be sad? He says, for the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. So Nehemiah says, I'll tell you why I'm sad. It's because my homeland, right, the land of my people, it's been destroyed. He said, the temple has been rebuilt, but the wall around the city is still left in ruins. And he says, it's heartbreaking. And then he finds a little bit of boldness inside of him. He says, so could I just ask you, King, could I get some time off, like significant time off, and potentially lead the charge in rebuilding the wall? Well, shockingly, the king grants his request. He allows Nehemiah to travel to Jerusalem to lead this massive project of rebuilding the walls. And he actually sends Nehemiah with a bunch of supplies and says, hey, we want to help in this process. Well, it takes Nehemiah 3 to 4 months to travel from Susa to Jerusalem, but eventually he arrives, he starts to mobilize people, he casts this vision of rebuilding the walls. There's an army of people, so to speak, that get excited about it, and they say, we're in. Tell us what we need to do, and they get to work. It's a project that should have taken several months, maybe even over a year to get done. But as these people focus themselves on the task in front of them, it ends up taking just 52 days. Crazy fast. That is visionary change. Nehemiah says the walls around the city of Jerusalem are broken and in disrepair, but I envision them being repaired. I envision them being strong walls again, and I'm going to lead the charge to make sure it happens. So the question we started with is, what's the vision for your life? Second question, what vision do you have that's bigger than just your life? Everything in life is dependent on two factors, right? The vision you have, dependent on two factors, God factors and human factors, right? Only God determines certain things, right? God determines our parents. He determines where we're born, when we're born. He determines our personality. He determines our gifts, right? Those things are out of our control. What is in our control is how we choose to maximize the gifts, the personality, the opportunities that God has given us. That's in our control. Right? So God creates the trees, but it's up to us to envision what those trees become. We have to envision chairs and tables and houses and different things that can be made from the trees. So what vision do you have for your life? And what vision do you have that's bigger than just your life? Now, a lot of us can answer the question, the vision for our life, pretty quickly. And the reason why is we just look at kind of where we're defeated or stuck, and we say, I want to be in a different place a year from now or a couple years from now. I think a lot of us, though, get stuck on this question, what vision do you have that's bigger than just your life? And so let me ask it a different way. What breaks your heart? Millard and Laura Fuller, their heart was broken over the reality that some people will never be able to afford a home. So back in the mid-'70s, they got some money together, they got some friends, and they built a house, and then they put someone in that house. And then they did it again. They built another house and put someone in that house, and then another house and put someone in that house. And eventually, their organization became known as Habitat for Humanity. And today, Habitat is in more than 70 countries around the world. More than 800,000 homes have either been built, rehabilitated, or repaired for people who would never be able to own a home on their own. And it's all because someone had a vision that was bigger than just your life. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, that's great, but I'm not Millard and I'm not Laura. Like, that's just not me, right? It's ridiculous to think that I would ever have that kind of vision. I don't have that kind of network. I don't have that kind of finances. I don't have that kind of organization to get people together at that level. And I want you to know, that's totally okay. I think for a lot of us, we just have to latch on to someone else's vision. This is why throughout the year, Great Lake Church, we partner with all sorts of organizations. We partner with all sorts of different mission efforts. And it's to give us the opportunity to latch onto someone else's vision. And you can always find different organizations that we're partnering with by going to greatlakeschurch.com/events. Right? You go to this part of our website, and it gives you opportunities to serve with different organizations. So maybe what breaks your heart is knowing that there are kids who go to bed every single night without a bed to actually sleep on. And so maybe you can just latch onto the vision of Sleep in Heavenly Peace and volunteer with Building Beds on Saturday, April 8th. Or maybe what breaks your heart is people in different parts of the world who go to bed hungry every single night. So you could latch onto the vision of Shalom Center in Kenosha, right? Help us serve at the soup kitchen and one of the upcoming days. We got a couple different options for you. Or maybe you could latch onto the vision of Feed My Starving Children and volunteer on Saturday, March 25th, and help pack meals for malnourished individuals around the world. Right? There are people with all types of vision that's bigger than just one person. And if you find one that inspires you, just latch onto it. I recently learned of a family in our church who launched a ministry called Marley's Ministry, and it offers hope and encouragement in super practical ways to parents who've experienced a premature birth of a child or the loss of an infant. I love that. It's their passion, something bigger than themselves. I know of a couple in our church who launched Corey's Project after they lost their son Corey to T-cell lymphoma at the age of 16. So they started this ministry to provide financial support to families with children battling pediatric cancer because they knew how much their lives were impacted when they went through that. There's a woman in our church who several years ago had a vision to bring all types of people together in order to give children the opportunity and support that they needed to succeed in school and in life, regardless of their background and upbringing. And so here's this woman who is retired, so to speak, quote unquote, and could be sitting, drinking martinis in some remote island somewhere, and instead she is using her passions to help improve educational outcomes for children, and she launched Building Our Future. There are so many great visions that you can latch onto. My question for you is, what vision do you have for your life? And what vision do you have that's bigger than just your life? And whatever the answer is, here's what you need to know. That vision, as you start to move toward it, is going to result in change. And when you bump up against change, there are two things you can absolutely expect. The first is this: you can expect to have some fear. Anytime that you move forward with vision, it requires change. And change means that there is uncertainty and risk. So when my wife, Rindy, and I, we decided, hey, we're going to launch Great Lakes Church. It's this vision we had. We moved our family across the country, right? This picture was taken just a few months before we moved. That vision ended up producing a whole lot of change. Changes for our children and the school that they went to, right? It produced change in the friends that we spent time with, the city that we lived in, the home that we lived in. Our level of income, level of security changed. Our routines changed. It was filled with a whole lot of uncertainty and risk. If you have a vision of getting married because you've fallen in love, I just want you to know it's a risk. When I'm meeting with young couples, I tell them this all the time. When you exchange vows, you are not just committing to marry the person standing in front of you. You are committing to marry the version of that person they become. Because we all become different individuals throughout our life, just as we go through different events and circumstances that change us, we evolve into different types of people. So you're not just marrying them, you're marrying whoever they become throughout life. That's a risk. It's safer to stay single. If you leave a secure job to launch a business, that is a risk. It's filled with uncertainty. If you're a young adult and you've been living with your parents, you've been mooching off them, but you have a vision of your life, you want to become independent, you decide to move out and get your own place, I'm telling you, it's filled with a lot of changes and a lot of uncertainty. And change is scary, it's risky. But often, not changing is even more risky. I'm sure you've heard this before. If you always do what you always have done, you'll always get what you've always got. You'll always be in the same predicament. But if you have a vision for your life, things can change. And as you move forward with that vision, just know it's going to include a lot of moving pieces. And a lot of moving pieces, a lot of change has uncertainty and fear attached to it. Something else you can expect with change is resistance. When Nehemiah was leading a team of people to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he kept being interrupted by individuals who wanted to distract him. They didn't want him to rebuild the walls. So they would say, Nehemiah, we want to have a meeting with you. They would try to lure him away from the walls. And so eventually Nehemiah decides to send messengers to these people wanting to meet with him. And here's what Nehemiah says, what we read. He says, so I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. I have a vision, and I'm not going to get distracted. Every time you have a vision for your life or something bigger than your life, just know it is going to be met with fear, but it's also going to be met with resistance. 1910, city of Cincinnati is experiencing incredible growth, and so there's plans put into place. They want to build an underground metro network, right? They want to build a subway. It's going to be 22 miles long. Bunch of people get excited about it. They said, let's do it. And so 10 years later, in 1920, construction finally gets underway. And they start moving forward, and it's exciting. But then they started experiencing resistance. There was economic challenges, structural challenges, there was infrastructure challenges, there was challenges with public support because how media was presenting it. And so 7 years after the project was started, it was stopped. At that point, the subway was only 2 miles long, and it was put on hold. And to this day, they've never revived the project. It's abandoned. Well, this is common with vision, right? People get excited about something, they start to move forward, they feel the resistance, and so they back away. Just know that vision means things have to change, and change is always going to experience resistance. Visionary change requires us to embrace the future, not protect the past. Right? It requires us to play offense and not defense. And we all know this is true, that often we wait way too long to have a vision for our life or something bigger than our life, right? We end up having a vision of becoming a healthy person only after we end up in the hospital. We have a vision of becoming a better spouse only after we learn that our spouse wants to file for divorce. We have a vision of becoming a better parent after we've lost the relationship with our kid. We have a vision of becoming financially responsible only after we're on the verge of bankruptcy. We have a vision of becoming a person of character after our integrity is lost. And at some point, we need a vision for our life. And so if it takes a crisis to do that, then so be it. But how about this? How about change before we have to? How about get a vision for our life and a vision that's bigger than our life before we feel this crazy urgency and this crisis in front of us that's forcing us to do it? Don't wait until it's too late to get a vision. So that's visionary change. Next week, we're going to wrap up this series, and I'm going to talk about changes happening at Great Lakes Church and changes that are just happening in general in our lives. And we're going to talk about some things that I'm excited to share with you, and so I hope you can make it. Let me pray for you. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your love. I pray, help all of us to have some sort of vision for our life, and a vision that's bigger than our life, so that we can make the most of the time we have on this planet. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for joining us here at Great Lakes Church. Again, my name is Carson, and I'm so glad that you chose to share some time with us this week. We hope something in this talk was meaningful to you, encouraging to you, and maybe even something worth writing down that you can go share with a friend. If you'd like to get involved, maybe join us at one of our physical locations in Southeast Wisconsin, or just be a part of our many other goings-on our social platforms or events in the area. Check out greatlakeschurch.com.